Brad, can I pay you a compliment that might be the highest compliment that I can pay a friend?
Whoa, hold on. Let me sit up in my chair a little bit here so I'm properly set up to receive this. Yes, you may.
All right, so I go to Disneyland for the first time in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, which, by the way, a cheap, affordable day for the family. It's virtually no-cost day for the family to go to Disneyland.
It's not like somebody jumps out from behind the bushes, grabs you, and just shakes you until every nickel falls out of your pocket, is it? It's just the happiest darn place on earth if you're an accountant.
If you're an accountant, yes. So, but here's the thing. Okay, so I'm on the Jungle Cruise, which is everybody remembers is the boat ride that's somewhat human controlled in the sense that it's on a fixed track. It is on a fixed course of water, but the boat driver, in one of the rarities for Disneyland, can kind of control when it speeds up, when it stops, when it goes, right? And so it feels like you are actually being guided around on the Jungle Cruise. Anyway, I'm listening to this guy give the Jungle Cruise spiel, which is always a delight. And I'm thinking to myself, you know who would be absolutely perfect for a Jungle Cruise guide is Brad Geiger, my friend Brad Geiger.
I tell you, every time I've been at Disneyland or Disney World, that's one of my favorite rides, just because I like sitting there and chuckling to myself about literally that, like how much fun I would have being that Jungle Cruise ship captain. You know, I would love doing that. Not for a long time, because I think people would get to me. But for like a week to get out of my system, I would love that.
You know, that's a really good point. It would get so old after a couple of months. Imagine like you're on month 6. You're like, I can't do this anymore. The same jokes. I mean, in some respects, those jokes are like handed down from the 1950s, from the original like joke writers for the Jungle Cruise. But you're right, a week would be kind of perfect. And that actually makes me think, like, let me ask you a broader question. If you could do any job in Disneyland, what would you do? And would it be the Jungle Cruise probably, or would it be...
number one would be Jungle Cruise, because I'd be able to talk. And, you know, I love hearing my own voice. My all-time favorite ride at Disney is the Haunted Mansion. But there are no good Haunted Mansion jobs there. You got great wardrobe, don't get me wrong. I love the outfits. But there's no good jobs. You either get to be that person that escorts people into the lobby that is basically a big elevator, or you help them onto the doom buggies and, you know, pretend that there's a ghost putting the little guide bar down. But that's it. That's all the jobs. So I would go number 1, Jungle Cruise, number 2, Haunted Mansion, just for the clothes.
Gotcha. Well, okay, so I'm assuming that you have not been to the California park to see this Star Wars ride called Rise of the Resistance. Have you seen this one, or is that does that exist
I have
in Florida?
Not seen that one.
Okay, so it's this new ride. I won't spoil it for people that haven't been, because it is quite a thing. I will say this, it's like 5 rides in one, and you'll see what I mean if you ever get to do the ride. It's not just one ride, it's multiple rides in one. And what's fun about it is at certain key points in transitions from ride A to ride B, you have to interact with humans that are dressed up for Star Wars.
Oh, cool.
And that to me seems so fun. Like, I would do that for a week or two, because you're dressed up as the Imperium, or actually, no, it's the First Order. You're dressed up as the First Order, and I will say that I got to ride the ride twice, right? And the first time, I got this super enthusiastic woman who's like, members of the Resistance, you can't escape. Like, she's totally leaning into it. Like, clearly, Brad, what you want is you want a college-age drama student who's like, and I work at Disneyland on weekends, and I make some extra scratch, you know. That's what you want out of Disneyland. You want a college student that's a drama student. So I go on Rise of the Resistance. I was like, that was great. I'm going later on today. I go later on today, and I get like a 45-year-old guy who is just phoning it in. So the exact same dialogue was like, members of the Resistance, you can't escape us. Please move forward and to the left.
To the left. Forward to the left.
Right. Just imagine a first order employee that's just done with Kylo Ren, done with everybody, just like, and just doing the arm swings of like an airline guy with a little yellow stick, just going to the left, please, to the left.
He's a week and a half from retirement. He's just got to make it this next few days. He doesn't care about the Force or the Jedis or nothing. He just wants to make it to retirement age.
Listen, I don't need to conquer the universe. I just need to conquer my pension. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his first order loving pal, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And as we record this episode, Brad is packing up his bag to come to San Diego to do the NCS talks at the San Diego Comic-Con Museum, which is a new building that neither he nor I have seen. Very excited for that. So by the time you're listening to this, we will already have done it. The magic will have already been put to bed, and so it's an exciting one. I'm looking forward to this trip, though.
So much. We're going to have so many great stories to tell. Hopefully, I'm going to be packing my microphone, so hopefully we have a little bit of chance to sit up at the bar, plug in our microphones, and record some thoughts and reminiscences as they happen. But the big thing is going to be the 2 live Comic Lab shows, and I cannot wait to do that. It's going to be so much fun. We've got great guests. We've got wonderful people coming up there, and we're going to be talking comics for 2 hours straight on Thursday. So you better believe next time we get a chance to hit the microphones, we're going to have lots of stories to tell you about the NCS week over there in sunny San Diego.
Absolutely. And on that note, let me jump us into our first topic for this show, which is, Brad, you and I have often referred back to a quote, and it goes a little something like this about cartooning. First you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast. And I think we've attributed that to Al Cap, was it?
Al Cap, yeah. The first time I heard that, you told me it, and you told me that was Al Cap. And it sounds like an Al Cap-ism, if I'm being honest. It's one of the few. Let's put it this way: it's one of the few things from Al Cap's life that you actually want to emulate. Is that axiom? There's a lot about that guy that you don't want to emulate, but that one sentence you can take. True? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. There's a lot about Al Cap not to like. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So, but I want to, because we've referred back to that a lot, though, because it is an interesting summary of an artist's arc in their career. First you get good, then you get fast, and then you get good and fast. But I wanted to talk over a new postulation of this that I think is kind of interesting, which goes like this. First, you make it work. Then you make it right, and then you make it fast as stages in your career. First, you make it work, then you make it right, and then you make it fast. And I see this as actually a better summation of what artists can expect in their first months and years, in their next couple of years, and then finally as they approach their 10,000 hours having been put in, right? So for me, the make it work part is like, just start getting it down. Start making the form, the shape, the function of a comic. Get the word balloons where they are, get the lettering going, get the line art going. Just make it work. And I associate this stage, Brad, with, I don't know, like my woodworking or my gardening, where it ain't pretty. I'm not winning any awards, but listen, I made it work. I built a cabinet, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just getting something down on the page or on the screen that looks like a comic. And that's kind of the hardest step, because a lot of us think it's got to be more than that, right? And we worry that it's not good enough. And the sad sorry truth is that you don't get to the next step without doing a bunch of work that just, let's face it, isn't very good. All you're going to get out of it is the enjoyment of doing it in those first early days. And that's okay. In fact, that's kind of wonderful, is doing it just for the joy of seeing what you can put on the screen, even though it's probably not going to be, something that's going to be, everybody's going to flock to it. But that's the most important part, is just making it work, learning how a gutter works and why, learning how a word balloon works, and how the very first parts of making those word balloons read in the right direction involves doing something that later on you look at it and you're like, oh my God, these word balloons read in the entirely wrong direction. I totally screwed everything up. So yeah, the first step is just make it work. And that involves a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes, but it's also kind of the most wonderful in the truest sense of the word. You're full of wonder at that point. The most wonderful part of making comics is that first step, make it work.
I like the way that you said that. It is the most wonderful because it is wondrous how like every stage is discovery and every stage is slow mastery. Yeah, you're right. So making it work, and I keep going back to in my own mind, my woodworking, which is because it's very physical and you can imagine what I'm saying when I say, look, I made a shelf that holds books. It ain't pretty, but I made a shelf that holds books. That's stage one. Then I go to build my next shelf. And, oh, yeah, go ahead, Brad. Yeah.
And every day that those books don't hit the floor, you know you did a good job.
Yes, because it works.
You can see.
It does the basic function of bookshelfdom. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And so I can point to my first 300 to 500 comic strips as like I made it work. This is a comic. The word balloons are there, the characters are there, the line art gets increasingly complementary to the piece, and so I've made it work. And again, going back to my woodworking, the next stage of getting it right, the with time and effort, my 20th bookshelf that I build, right, or my 500th comic strip that I draw, everything lines up a little bit better. Like no one would really have any critiques for it now. Like now it is very professional. I've gotten all my ducks in a row. With time and with effort and with concentration, I can make it work. And I can make it work and I can make it right. And so to me, that's a nice summary of those first two stages, because then the third stage is making it fast. And it's no demonstrably different comic than the stage where I could make it right. Like I can still make just a perfect comic as I could 5-10 years ago, but now I can do it in half the time, right? Yeah. And so imagining the woodwork, it's like, you can anticipate the cuts you have to make. You can anticipate the tools you need to lay out, right? It's all quicker with woodworking by the time you've built your 100th bookshelf. And the same is true by the time you've put in your 10,000 hours in your comic. Is not only can you make it work, right? You got a work a day comic strip there. Not only can you make it right, oh, it's perfect now. The writing is top notch. The line art is top notch. Now you can do it in half the time or a third of the time, or even, shaving off a little bit of the time here. So you've made it work, you've made it right, and then you can make it fast. And I think that's actually an interesting summation of the comics journey.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier what would happen if somebody critiqued your bookshelf at stage 2. And I want to go back to that because it's a fascinating concept in that you could probably get critiqued at every stage of the way, but those critiques would be very telling about where you are on your process, right? If you're on step 1, those critiques are going to be like, hey, listen, champ, next time use a ruler. Right. It's going to be that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because this one shelf you can see you had to use a lot of like either wood glue or putty to fill in the cracks or something like that. Right. You are at that point, and the same thing when you're a cartoonist, it's going to be stuff like, hey, you know what? I know it feels like a lack of inspiration to you, but your best bet is putting that first word balloon in the upper left-hand corner all the time. Even though you don't think you're doing great composition, it doesn't matter. What matters is reading it right. So then, like in stage 1, your critique is going to be the basics of cartooning. Right? Gesture and composition and word balloons and gutters and all that kind of stuff. Stage 2, the critiques you're still going to get critiques, but they're going to be fine tuning. It's going to be, hey, take a look at how you break the lines in that word balloon. And you don't have breaks that separate that into phrases and natural breaks. You just drew a text box, and wherever those lines broke, that's where they broke, and you drew a circle around it. You called it a word balloon, and that's not great comics, right? Now, and those critiques would help you get to stage 3, where you've been doing that stuff so often that you've learned at stage 2. Now it's like rote to you, right? Like you don't think about how to do a great word balloon or a great composition quite so much because you've done it so many times. Right. And because you've solved all those problems so many times and it's just second nature, guess what happens? That speed that you're talking about. Now you're ramping it up. All this stuff is coming out natural. Boom, boom, boom. You're not solving problems so much as you're applying solutions that you've already figured out before. And that's where you're getting that speed that you're talking about.
Right. If anything, the critiques become more and more about finesse questions.
Yes.
You know, it's not so much broad strokes anymore. Now it's more like, hey, I see that your dialogue in this comic strip is 50 words. Do you think we can get it down to 48 or 45? You know, like, what if we shave off these 3 words? Let's get to the punch word faster in that final balloon kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like Brad said, there's the critiques will let you know where you are in that stage. But anyway, broadly speaking, though, you know, AlCap had first you get good, then you get fast, then you get good and fast. Yeah. And I actually think the first you make it work, then you make it right, and then you make it fast is actually might be a better summation of the process, because his idea of first you get good is not actually the first step of any process in learning an art, you know, or activity or craft. I don't start woodworking and immediately get good, but the thing that I do first is make it work. I learned that the gutters can never touch at any point, or else they kind of lose the point of being a gutter. I learned that I can't use sausage word balloons because that's unpleasing to the eye. I learned that I can't have the tails cross on word balloons because that's confusing to normal English speakers, you know, in terms of the order of things. You learn all those basic things. You're just making it work. You're getting it down into a basic comic. And then as time goes on, you've done a couple hundred. Now you start to make it right. And as Brad said, the finesse things come in.
That's you just said time, and that's the perfect transition into the next subtopic that I wanted to bring up. How long did you think that it took you to clear that first step, make it work? And the reason I ask is that I can envision somebody listening to this show and they're like, okay, Dave and Brad say, because I agree, by the way, well, you know, you're a professional. You know that you put in the work when you're doing good work and you're doing it fast. And so they're going to try to work on their speed as quickly as possible, because it's kind of like an end run. I'm putting the cart before the horse. And so it's important that we take time now to talk about how long do you think it took? I think it took me to make it work. I can easily take a look at, and by the way, this was a daily comic strip that I put out 5 to 6 days a week, no breaks for 5 to 10 years. I forget, well over 10 years I was doing dailies. I think looking back over my own history, it took me a good 7 or 8 years of daily updates of a 4-panel comic strip to get where I was really making it work. Like 5 for sure, 5 absolutely, maybe 7 if I'm being really honest with myself, was step 1. What do you think? Just looking back over your work, how long do you think that it took you to do step 1?
This is a really good question. Your answer is making me rethink my answer, because I was going to say 3 to 5 years just to make it work. But then I was going to make a longer stretch of time to make it right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and maybe this is just a different way of thinking about it. And so why not say it the way I was going to say it? So I'm going to say 3 to 5 years to make it work. Like, I got really workable comic strips by the end of 3 to 5 years. You know, like no one could argue like this is the form of a comic strip, but I couldn't quite make it right for maybe another 10 years. I'm going to put a bigger gap between me and perhaps what you're going to say. Like that second stage, I don't know that I got good for 13 to 15 years, you know? I got workable faster than Brad, but it sure took me a hot second to get good versus Brad. How long did it take you to get to the second stage? Let me just ask you outright.
Let's see, if I go with, let's see, my career in comics has been 24 years. So let's say I take that first 7 and I'm saying that's making it right. I'm going to take the next, if I put the next 7, that puts me up 14. Yep, that's just about right. If I just kind of take that next chunk of time, 7 to 8 years was making it right. In other words, I'm on the second half of Evil Ink, the comic strip. It hasn't turned into a graphic novel yet. And now I'm starting to really figure out not only what it means to do the visual part of comics, which we've kind of focused on so far, but also the much more important, the writing part of comics. I was starting to figure out how to make a storyline a stretch and how to make that a satisfying experience and so forth, because I can see when I really started and focused on Patreon, which was about 10 years ago, that's when I started to get fast. Because when I would look back at that point, I had positioned myself at around about 2014 to 2016. Now Evil Ink becomes a graphic novel. It's not a daily comic strip. I've completely revamped how I write stories, how I approach story itself. And in fact, that took another major kind of tweak later on. But in 2014, now I'm doing work that is much faster. And I take a look at my post quantity, just the quantity alone, what I challenged myself, my update schedule, and what I was able to do in terms of a full page and then a full page of Evil Ink and then a number of commissions and a single panel cartoon. Looking back over everything that's happened since, let's say, 2014 to 2016, there's no doubt in my mind that now I'm starting to build up speed. Now I can do it good and fast, because at that point I had quit my day job and I needed to. Or at least I felt I needed to. And that's always comes back to the quantity versus quality issue. But looking back, I can definitely see that in the last 10 years, that's when the speed kicked in.
Well, this is a fun talk because so for me with Sheldon, I would think only in the last 5 years. So that's at like the 20-year mark for me. I'm now in my 25th year with Sheldon, or maybe 26th, 20. I think it's 25th year with Sheldon. Only in the last 5 years have I gotten fast, I think.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, and I'll say this, so I'll out myself to the world, with Drive, I don't know that I'm fast yet. It takes me an ungodly long time to produce a page of Drive, almost embarrassingly long. Like, I should not take me this long, but I'm just not there yet, is the truth. Yeah. I'm not fast yet, and that's okay. I can do it right, but dear God, does it take me a long time to do it right. It takes me a long time to make a Drive page, embarrassingly long. And so all of which to say, with Brad and I admitting how long it took us with all of this, is that it's not an overnight thing. And had you asked me probably at any point along those journeys, I might tell you, oh yeah, I can make it work. Oh, I can make it right. Yeah. And I might even have thought to myself, oh, I can make it fast. But only in looking back on it now do I go, oh no, I was neither making it fast nor making it right at that stage in my career. Oh, 5 years later, I was making it right, but I still wasn't making it fast, you know? Yeah. And only now can I look back and be like, oh, now I can do Sheldon right and fast, you know?
And now you're talking about a whole nother thing, which you're absolutely right about, by the way. And that is that you and I both have done the same title as different comics, or we've had an evolution. All you got to do is look at the first Evil Ink book and take a look at the art style I was using then and the writing I was doing. I could do that.
Do you even consider those the same title in a way?
I almost don't. Don't, because they're so different. I mean, I was doing a very, very newspaper comic strip style at that point. And now Evil Ink is something completely different. And if I'm being honest with myself, I had to have a minor reset and make it work, make it fast, or make it work, make it right, make it fast transition in the later stages of Evil Ink, because I had to relearn a whole new way of drawing and a whole new way of processing. And I'm still like what you're saying about Drive, when it comes to like an After Dark page, I feel the same way. All of a sudden, I feel like a bonus cartoon, like a little single panel. I can crank those out relatively quickly. I can go back in Clip Studio and see that it takes an hour and a half for me to do a single panel comic. Once I've thought of the idea, which takes much longer, but the execution, And that's a lot how I was drawing in Evil Ink. Now I'm drawing completely different. And I guarantee you those pages take me a couple days sometimes to put out, because I'm doing way different work. So it would be great if we could say, well, okay, 2000 to 2007, 2007 to 2014. But the truth is, like you just pointed out, there's been all these miniature sub-routines of that whole thing that has gone through as we evolved into different cartoonists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you and I have both been in this game long enough, both 25 years, where I know that if you ask Dave Kellett 10 years from now, I will look back on this phase thinking, oh, I was fooling myself thinking I had it right or thinking I was fast. Like now I can do it. Now I see the pattern. Yeah. And you're like, I anticipate whatever finding out whatever failings I have right now 10 years from now. And it's okay. I'm at peace with that, in a way that I didn't know and didn't anticipate when I was 25, where I thought I knew how good I was and hey, the world didn't appreciate me yet. Now that I look back on it, I'm like, all right, buddy, you got 10 more years before you're going to be in the ball game. You know what I mean? Like 25-year-old Dave Kellett thought he was the bee's knees as cartooning. And time and tide kind of taught me, you need about 10 more years of work and then you'll get good.
But isn't that a beautiful thing? Because it means that you're better now than you were then. And even if you look back and when you're 60 years old and you look back at the work that you did in your 40s and you say, you were kidding yourself then too, Dave. How wonderful. It means that you've gotten better again. Everything that you're looking at as a negative is actually a positive because it says that you've been on a long journey of continually pushing yourself to get better. And I always say it's hard to get worse at something you do every day. I used to say it's impossible, but over the years, I've seen some people who are giving it a good shot. And part of that is because I don't think they're pushing themselves. They're very, very content in what they're doing. One thing you can say about you, no matter what, you've never been content. You've always been trying to get to that next stage. That's why I guarantee you when you're 60, you're going to look back at the stuff you're doing today and you're going to say, not that great. Why? Because you got better. You didn't get content. You were always pushing yourself.
Well, I'm going to spring this on you. I think there might be a fourth stage to this that we didn't talk about.
Ooh.
And so first you make it right. First you make it work. Then you make it right. Then you make it fast, right? Yeah. And then I think about 20 years go by, maybe 30 years go by. And then I think you hit a stage called make it better than your heroes. Where we're not there yet, but we're about 10 to 15 years away where the people that made us want to go in cartooning will be as good or better than they were. You know what I mean? And that to me is part, because you said you're never content. That's sort of my final boss stage is like, I want to get as good as the best cartoonists I ever read. And that's not ego. I'm not saying I'm going to get there. I'm saying that's my North Star of what I'm trying to shoot for,
Yeah, interesting. I've got some thoughts on that, but at the risk of taking us into a different direction, and I don't want to contradict you. I think you're absolutely right. However, as you were talking, I saw it in a different way. I'll share with you now. And that is this. I don't think that there is ever a time that you get as good as your heroes. I don't think that ever comes. Okay. And I don't think you ever stop trying. But I don't think it ever happens. And that's because at a certain stage in life, you realize that it's impossible to be as good as your heroes. You can never be that good as they were at doing what they did because you are not them. And you're doing this whole other thing. And even though it might be very, very similar, you might be doing a superhero comic, and you like me absolutely adored John Buscema. And I can never be as good as Big John. Even though we're doing certain things, not because I haven't pushed myself to get to that level of proficiency, it's because I'm never going to be Big John. I'm going to be me. And I think the fourth stage is realizing that and then focusing on becoming, instead of trying to knock Bill Watterson off of his throne, instead you start to realize what it means to be the best version of Dave Kellett that you possibly can be, and realizing that that's just as good as if you had knocked somebody off of their perch.
You are very wise. That's very wise. I'm being quite sincere. That's very wise. I think you are right that it's more of a Zen recognition that the thing that I was chasing was not the other. The thing that I was chasing is the best version of me. It's whatever is inside of me. And I'm not in any way poo-pooing that, and I'm not falsely making fun of it. I'm very sincere. That is a really wise point on your part. And so I think you're right. I will still spend the next 10 to 15 years thinking I'm chasing my heroes. But what I'm trying to do is polish up the best version of art that can come from Dave Kellett, which no matter what I do is going to be demonstrably different from my heroes. It will walk its own path. And you're right. So this is me saying you're right. That's a very wise insight. Thank you for that. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So, Dave, I've got a few updates to share from previous episodes that we've had, and the first one is this: I think the previous episode of Comic Lab, we talked a lot about lettering advice, hand lettering specifically. We were talking about. Well, shortly after recording that show, in fact, the next day, I had lunch with Danielle Corsetto, which was absolutely delightful. She was doing a book tour to celebrate 25 years of Girls with Slingshots, by the way.
Hey, congratulations, Danielle.
You better believe that I picked her brain for as much tour information as I could, so that one day when we're finally ready to launch Comic Lab across America, we can take some of the stuff that she learned and applied it. But as we were talking, it was kind of a perfect day. We were up in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia, and we had gotten our food. The place that I had selected didn't have seating. It was kind of like a walk-up place. And so luckily there was a park a block away. We found a shady place to sit, ate our food on the park bench, and just it was like one of those days you kind of dream about when you're a little kid, talking shop with a cartoonist that you respect so much. And you're both there was never a dead zone in the conversation. As soon as one topic ended, the next topic started, and it was just like, ba, 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 ba. Along all those ba, ba, da, bops was this. We got talking about lettering, and Danielle shared with me her approach to hand lettering that she had picked up, and I unfortunately, I don't remember who she learned this from, but listen to this. This was an approach that Danielle told me about. First, this person, and I think Danielle still works this way. I don't want to put words into her mouth, but I'll just present it as the process that she shared. All of the sketches are done digitally. This is kind of brilliant because you can use all those tools at your disposal to get that sketch to look right. You can lasso something, put it where it belongs. You can take this face that you drew too big, and you can transform it and scale it down, and all of those things. You can flip the image, mirror image, so that you can see the flaws and then flip it back. So doing the sketch digitally, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah,
and then also, as they're finishing up the sketch, they would put in the digital lettering, all digital, and get those word balloons and the lettering all situated exactly where it needed to be according to the sketch. Sounds great, right? Now, you take that and you flip it. You do like a mirror image of that, and then print it out on a sheet of Bristol board. On the back, right? So now you've got a mirror image printed on the back of a sheet of Bristol board. You flip to the front of the Bristol board, you put it on a light box, and now you've got your sketch and digital, perfectly kerned, perfectly leaded lettering that you can trace, for lack of a better word, but make it your hand lettering using those letter forms as a guide. Beep, bop, boop. And of course, you do the rest of the comic as well. Now you've got a complete original art with hand lettered lettering that's perfect every time.
Yes.
And you've got something that you can sell as original art. You've got the best, literally the best of both worlds. You've got the best use of digital art in getting that sketch just right. And you've got the best use of digital lettering, and you put that and flip it around on the Bristol board, and you've got absolutely beautiful original art.
Okay, so this idea is so good that I'm almost angry because
right?
I'll tell you a lot of reasons. First of all, this is one of the reasons why I love doing the show with you, because you and I love the art of comics, and we love talking shop.
Yes.
And as I said before, we're at the 25-year point. Yep. Brad, I have read, I have thought about, I have executed, I have attempted so many different ways to do lettering. This approach has never occurred to me in 25 years. Flipping the artwork and printing it on the back. And I'm first of all, my mind is blown. Second of all, Danielle, you're a genius. Third of all, it's just fun I want people to know that I have a childlike excitement about how fun it is to learn a new way of doing the same thing you've done for 25 years in what is arguably a way better way. Like, that's exciting to learn new stuff after 25 years.
Isn't it? I mean, and it's so and also it's so wonderful because I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of original art for the Kickstarter that I launched earlier this summer, because those books are heading my way, and pretty soon I'll start into the fulfillment swing of that. And I do a fair amount of original art at the higher tiers. And what I always did was something similar to that, where I would take and print out a sketch that I'd done in Clip Studio, put it on a light box, put the Bristol board on top of it. But then you're always kind of, having a hard time either lining it up or getting it just right or seeing through it. I'm going to try this for some of my original art if I can get some Bristol board going through that Brother laser printer, because what a wonderful way of doing that. And also doing the hand lettering I would do with an Ames guide if there was any lettering in this original art, which always, my lettering ain't great. I've only done hand lettering for about a year, doing it with an Ames lettering guide, and I went right back to digital lettering because, again, going back to Make It Fast, that was part of Make It Fast. But I think I'm going to try this in part of my next swing of original art, because holy cats, I can imagine this really making some beautiful original art. And that's coming from a guy. And by the way, I also found out she's like you. She doesn't like blue lines on her original art.
Yeah,
I know
Danielle
you don't.
And I are similar about that. Yeah.
I love blue lines. I like seeing the story under the story of how that art came into being. But that's an aesthetic thing. There's not a right or wrong answer. But it also, if you're like you and Danielle, gives you perfectly clean original art to give your person.
So I want to break this down because there's a lot to talk about for me, who's very excited about this idea. I cannot emphasize enough how genius I think this is. But secondly, the deep listener to the show might be saying to themselves, well, Dave, this is how you do it right now with Sheldon. And you're right to an extent, but let me tell you what's different about it. So I, like Danielle, also sketch digitally for Sheldon. As Brad said, it gives you all the advantages of being able to flip, to resize, to copy paste, to digitally edit, right? All without penciling. I also letter digitally. I lay out my word forms, my letter forms with a font that's similar. It's not my font, but it's similar to my font enough that I can write over it. But what I do is I print it out on 11 by 17 cheap paper. And I say cheap intentionally because I want more light, more lumens to come through the paper. Because I have to put my 11 by 17 down, and then I put my 11 by 14 Bristol vellum, which is a thicker paper, over on top of it. I tape it together. I put it on a light board, and then I execute it in ink, right?
Yeah.
What's brilliant about Danielle's idea and execution is there's one piece of paper for the lumens to come through, not two pieces of paper.
Right.
There's less waste for another thing. And then as a third one that we haven't talked about, for someone who buys the original art, it's kind of neat that the digital sketch is on the back. And yet when you frame it up and display it with projected light, it'll never come through in a way that will ruin the experience on Bristol vellum. Only if you hold it up to a light board would you see that light coming through. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to like about this. It's
gorgeous. It's really
I kind of want to try this today. I'm fascinated by this process.
It's a really interesting way to think about your art. So it's something I definitely wanted to get onto the show.
Can I just say too, in a sort of game recognizes game way, Brad and I have always seen from afar how Danielle, she thinks deeply about cartooning, and God, does she experiment and respect the art in terms of, like, first of all, she's an amazing cartoonist. She's probably one of the best ones alive right now. But she both creates art for art's sake and yet has no problem diving into capitalism. And yet also thinks deeply and you can tell reads and explores deeply about how to make art. And it really comes through in her final product. Anyway, so it's just, again, game recognizes game. Good job, Danielle, for being awesome, because that is a brilliant idea.
Absolutely. Now, our second update of the day is we're going to talk about Substack Notes really quick. And I'm going to take just a moment to promote. We've got a 3-part special on Substack, drilling down on using Substack as a comics artist. And it's going to be pro tips only. So you got to be a Patreon backer to hear it. It's going to be, I'm telling you, Dave, I did a 3-part drilling down deep dive on Substack, and I could have done 4. We're going to work the rest of it back into the show. But I'm telling you,
gang, Brad loves to hear himself speak. He could have done 6 or 7 if you asked him to.
Well, and also,
no, but also, like we're springboarding off what we were just saying about Danielle, you think deeply about art, and you're constantly trying to. It's one of the things I love about you, and so I recognize in you, game recognizing game, that you have sparked with Substack that you see a lot of potential in it, and so even though I haven't delved in yet. Boy, do I get excited, from afar about how excited you are for Substack.
Yeah. After years and years of, and literally it's been a couple of years now, ever since Musk drove Twitter into the dirt, looking for something that works as well as social media platforms has worked. And let's face it, none of them have measured up. However, once I saw provable, objective results on Substack, you bet your boots I started diving in. And then that's when I discovered all the things that you're probably missing about using it, because they've got a lot built into Substack and it's so easy to miss. So that's what those 3 episodes are, is a bunch of stuff that you're missing if you're not really getting granular on Substack. And I can't wait to share them with you.
Well, before you do the quick update that you're going to do for Substack today, can I ask you just a broad stroke thing? Because it's been a couple of months. Without putting you on the spot for metrics, broad strokes, are you happy with the results you're getting from Substack in a provable way? Like, is it like, oh, this really feels nice? Or you're like, oh, no, these numbers are really starting to show up?
Overjoyed. And I'll tell you how I know that I'm happy about it. I've started mirroring the stuff that I post on webcomics.com. I've mirrored that on the Webcomics Handbook on Substack, right? It's just a mirror of what I'm posting there.
Yeah.
If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to learn more. I hear you do webcomics.com and I see you're on Substack. Which do you want? I kind of nudge them towards Substack, even beyond my
Really?
own
Really?
subscription service that I own and control. I kind of nudge them towards Substack because the only difference is that you don't have the archive that webcomics.com has. But I don't get the sense that a whole lot of people are doing archive dives on webcomics.com. I point them towards Substack because the experience is so much better, and the ability to grow and again, all of those baked in features that Substack has that I just can't build in myself.
Right.
I point them towards Substack.
Here's why I'm excited for you, and alternately for me, for when I eventually do Substack, is that, do you remember when our friend Jason Chatfield was on the show and he was talking about how he knows the guys that started Substack and he trusts them and he likes them and they have good intentions. And the cynic capitalist in me said, yeah, but eventually, they're gonna eventually break it. And in the same way that like Google started out with the don't be evil, and now they are demonstrably a monopoly, as evidenced by the fact that they lost their case. What I'm getting at is, the cynic in me says, 5 to 6 years from now, though, Substack will start to inshitify based on the VC capital, the angel investing, will start to demand a return on the money that they put forth for Substack. But here's the good news. The realist in me as a cartoonist goes, 5 to 6 years, great. It's great. I'm so happy that there's an option that replaces Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, great. I'll take 5 to 6 years before it inshitifies, and then in 5 to 6 years, I'll jump to the next thing. Because a lot of the things, like Brad and I always say, a comics award is not as valuable as buying yourself another year in this career, in this industry. Right. And Substack might buy us another 5 years in this career, don't you think?
Yeah. I agreed 100%. There's a reason I'm spending so much time on this platform.
So, okay, go ahead. Now that I've talked you to death, what is the pro tip that you want to share for everybody?
It goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. So first, I'm going to remind you, Substack is two things. It's posts and notes. Posts are the newsletter type things that you're sending out to everyone on the Substack ecosystem, but specifically to the people who are subscribers. All right. And if you're just starting out, I encourage you very strongly not to think about paid subscribers and all that stuff, because you've just got a very small audience, most likely right now. And you're in audience building mode. So those posts should be going out to everyone. It'll be that first radio button there. Don't mess around with paid and free subscribers. Just get that thing out there for a couple of years until you built your audience. Yeah. And so that's your posts. That's newsletter stuff. That's your comic when it updates, goes out as a newsletter. And also, I like doing just a newsletter every week that says behind the scenes stuff that's going on. To the extent that I'm willing to share it, stories from my personal life and sketchbook stuff. Because all that stuff is certainly stuff that readers like to read. They like to know behind the scenes. But also, I'm throwing in a little Patreon promotion in there along the way. I'm throwing in a lot of other things as little interstitials that I just happen to sneak in there. There's a reason I'm doing that. And that same newsletter that goes out on Substack, you better believe it goes out to the free member tier on my Patreon, because it does the same thing. All of it is basically saying, hey, we're having so much fun. Here's a little bit more information about me. And by the way, wouldn't it be great to participate in these other things? That is Substack posts. Now, what we're going to do in this little update is talk about Substack notes, because there's a huge opportunity going on right now. And I think a lot of us are missing it. Here's what it is. Substack notes is like Twitter, in that it's Substack's own little mini social media platform. And it works like every other social media platform that you've ever used. You post up there, people comment, they like it, they share it, and they build off it. The 4 C's work beautifully on notes. Here's the problem. A lot of people notice this very quickly. Right now, because Notes is so new, it's only like a year or two old. Because Substack is new, Substack Notes is so new, most of the people posting content there are writers, because it's mainly a platform for writers, prose writers, poets, short story writers, et cetera, journalists, stuff like that. And writers, just like cartoonists, have a depressingly poor idea of what good social media is. In other words, they're posting a lot of stuff that nobody really wants to read. They're posting sad sack pissing and moaning about the creative process. They're posting about the rejection they got. They posted that they've never been published and probably never will. They're posting you every time that they got writer's block, or sometimes they're posting when it's not totally negative stuff that, again, nobody cares about. Word count. You see word count posts all the time on Substack Notes. I wrote 135 words today. I wrote 10,053. Who cares? Here's the problem. It's overwhelmingly negative, sad sack, depressing crap. And there's a whole lot of it, right? All of which for cartoonists is great news. Okay, this is really good stuff because they're posting things that are important to themselves and other writers, but they're posting things that aren't important or aren't joyful even to potential new readers. And the only reason to be on social media is to gain new readers. Everything else is window dressing. If you're a creative person, you're not on social media to talk about the time you stubbed your foot on the table, unless it's a funny story. You're not there to talk about religion or politics. You're there to get new readers. If I had no problem getting new readers, I would be off of every social media platform that there is. There's no reason. In fact, with the election coming up, true story, I took social media, every platform, every app off my iPhone, because it has gotten so unimportant at this point that and it's gotten so bad with politics. I just took it off. I do a little check-in on my desktop once a day. That's it, right?
Wow, what a productivity boost for you, by the way.
You better believe it. So here's where the opportunity comes in for cartoonists. Not only should you be posting visual things on Substack Notes, whether it's a sketch, whether it's a comic, and you can do a panel by panel read through on Substack Notes, just like you can on Threads. Yeah, I like to give them a little heads up. Hey, tap and slide for panel by panel because people aren't used to it yet. But number one, you should be posting visual things on Substack Notes, and number two, this is the time with an overwhelming dirge of sad sack, depressing bullshit. Your one post that is about joy, your one post that's upbeat and optimistic and happy and friendly, talking about I don't care what, as long as it's interesting perceivably to another person, and word count is not that. If you're out there posting happy, upbeat, optimistic, joyful stuff, you are going to stand out like a lighthouse on a foggy day to the people who are trying to find new things to discover on Substack, because the contrast is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, not even being on Substack, boy, there is no more navel-gazy type of creative than certain journalists that are like, the process is, and you're like, all right, come on, just get to it. So even from afar, I wholeheartedly co-sign this because I saw the same things happen on early Twitter and on any other social media site where the navel-gazing or sad sackedness it becomes overwhelming, and you're like, what am I even doing following? Like, I, like Brad, find that a cartoonist is best served by sharing the actual art on the social media platform, not a link away, and making each thing that you share in some way a spark of delight. It doesn't have to be joy. It could be a fight scene in Evil Inc., or it could be a moment of drama in Drive, right? It doesn't have to be pure joy, but it has to have a spark there of entertainment, of delight, of moving it forward, of, you know what I'm getting at there is that it has to be substantively emotionally delightful. And you can define delight as a broad spectrum of human emotions that can be captured there. It doesn't necessarily have to be joy per se, although I tend to write very joy-filled stuff. Brad does too. It just has to be a spark of delight and self-contained and in the notes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There's an opportunity. It's very clear right now. you can really stand out on notes. And think about it. Once you get somebody over to the Substack ecosystem, that's where I'm actively looking for new people to subscribe to. That's where I'm actively looking for new content that I can interact with. It's on notes. And
right.
Doing negative stuff is not going to do that.
Well, I've got a third update that I want to bring onto the show. And this is sort of at the 1 year mark from our last National Cartoon Society meeting. Brad and I, as you remember, sat rapturously from a speech by the Andrews McMeals folk, where they talked about Kindle Direct Publishing and how it has worked out really well for Andrews McMeel, and how they, in all fairness, we're trying to pay it forward to the cartoonists and the independents in the room, saying like, hey, you may not be aware of this. Let's put it on your radar as our gift from you, from us to you, Andrews McMeel. Here is how we do it. Here's why you should try it. Bada bing, bada boom. So Brad and I excitedly went home, put a lot of time and effort into Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, to get our books up there. We're about at the year point, and I want to give you the results, which I think are markedly different from Andrews McMeel for good reasons that we can talk about. Yeah. But my results are not a lot of growth, maybe under $200 of income, maybe more. I don't know. I haven't actually cracked the numbers, but not enough where it was worth it for me to crack the numbers. Like, it was not a lot of money. And I had to take all of my ebooks off my other digital offerings for, I think it was 6 months. They sort of have this window of like, first and only place to buy Dave Kellett ebooks had to be on KDP, right? So I honored that. I kept it on KDP, but I'm now since putting them all back up on my site, on Shopify and other places. My 1 year update is that unless you have a Calvin and Hobbes in your stable that's naturally bringing a lot of foot traffic to your KDP books or your Big Nate books, or, what have you, books that parents are already familiar with, for example, it's really hard to break through the noise on KDP of discoverability, because personally, I think that they are being absolutely swamped by AI submitted and created books. And so it's just a deluge of titles that makes discoverability damn near impossible. So I, at the 1 year mark, do not recommend KDP for your efforts. You certainly can if you want. I do not recommend it. And I'm actively moving now to duplicate all of my ebook offerings on other sites, which Brad, I think, has a good suggestion, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's something I wanted to bring up. Putting a cap on KDP real quick, though. If you did sign up for KDP and this hit me sideways, I was not prepared for it, you're automatically re-upped in 3-month cycles. So if you're planning on getting off of it, you got to be prepared, because I went through and I got off of KDP and found out that certain titles of mine won't actually be off of KDP until October, because I just got re-upped in 3-month spans of time, which is also shady as hell.
It is shady. Let me ask you this. Is there a reason why you didn't want to just leave them up on KDP?
Because they're going to immediately see me when I post them other places. Then I'll get a nasty letter from Amazon that I've got to then deal with, and God knows what they're going to do to my account. And I have other things like the print books that are selling well there, and I don't want to flummox that up. And I'll be dealing with an AI that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you're dealing with Amazon, you want to avoid as much dealings with them as possible, because it's impossible to get anything straightened out with them.
You're right. If there's a way to avoid getting kerfuckled with Amazon, then it's worth trying to avoid it, because, like Brad said, you're now largely dealing with customer service AI rather than a human being, and it's annoying as heck. Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, what is the recommendation that you had as maybe a KDP alternative?
I got to tell you, this is something that I really was surprised by, and it's Global Comix, Comix, globalcomics.com. Okay. It is a platform much like Webtoons and Tapas and so forth. But I got to tell you, the reading experience, they have a panel by panel reading experience that you can set up. Very, very similar to KDP, by the way. And they've got a online setup wizard that you denote each one of your panels, and you're able to do it. It's very well done, very good programming. The user experience is top notch, and you can set up using your PDF of your graphic novel, you can upload that and then set up a panel by panel reading experience that when I did my first couple tests was jaw-droppingly good. Really good for small screen reading, which of course is what we're looking for. Has a different audience than Webtoons and Tapas in that, like we've said on the show before, if you're not doing a certain type of comic and just look at those two platforms to see what that is, you're really going to not have a lot of reach there. Global Comix is a completely different ecosystem that I think is a better fit for an awful lot of us. The reading experience is fantastic. The user experience is from a creator standpoint is good. And once I put up a couple of my archive comics to Global Comix, I liked it so much, I just started unpublishing things on KDP. Even if it was like still in KDP till October, I just unpublished it because it's not doing anything there anyway. It's not doing me any good. So it's like, I'll just pretend like I never uploaded it and I'll wait for the clock to tick down and do it that way. I've got right now, and it's been, not more than a month and a half. Early reaction to Global Comix is that I'm really comfortable endorsing it as a place for you to start to build audience. If for no other reason, that panel by panel reading experience is absolutely what I've been desperate to see in a comics platform.
Well, I have to say, going into this conversation, not having heard or known anything about it, perusing it over just now, Image seems to have a huge presence, as does Boom and Archaea, or Archaea. I never know how to pronounce that one. Humanoids, which is the French imprint, is on there as well. So it seems to be a really big indie location, or you know what I mean, pro indie in the sense of like I don't know, a publishing house that's not as big as DC and Marvel, but it's also bigger than Dave Kellett or Brad Geiger. So that's a good sign. I would want my lawyer to look over whatever their rights claim is before I do it. But I'm really encouraged by your praise of them and who else is on there. That's a good sign for the platform.
Yeah, so far I'm giving it a mitigated thumbs up as far as how I am. And by the way, I've gotten good experiences, audience building there. Like I've had a very good reach for somebody who's just starting out. Really decent reach. So a early days thumbs up for globalcomics.com.
Well, that's a good enough note, Brad, to wrap it up for there. So a reminder to everyone, we will be bringing you the NCS recorded shows in the weeks ahead as we do them from San Diego. We're going to be sitting in San Diego making plans for Comic Lab across America. I'm very excited for that. And we've got an exciting fall of both of us fulfilling our Kickstarters, both Pickles and Evil Inc. and Drive. And so I'm excited for the months coming up ahead, Brad. It's gonna be a good year, I think, to finish off with.
We're gonna be bringing this one in for a landing. And speaking of doing that, you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my ever delightful friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I will go ahead and say that like an unenthusiastic cast member for the Resistance on Rise of the Resistance there at Disneyland. Patreon.com/ oh, you're captured. You move to the left, please. Move to the left. You're captured. Move to the left, please. Move to the left. Could not have cared less about delivering the line with any oomph. Just chef's kiss perfect at phoning it in.
Yeah, there's a guy who lost his pension. I guarantee it.
And you're right. So this is me saying you're right. That's a very wise insight. Thank you for that. Oh, you want to leave it there? Because why?
Oh,
we're not going to.
I'm not going to touch that.
That's not.
I'm not going to touch that. There's no going higher than up.
Oh my God, that's funny. You're like, nope. I'm not touching that.
No,
oh my God.
Who puts a cherry on top of a cherry?